Hello, welcome to Marketing Matters, the show where we explore all things marketing and uncover those things that matter for you and your success. I'm your host, Denise Millet, and my hope and mission is to bring marketing and technology to you in a way that's useful, without jargon, complexity, or confusion, so you can grow your business, expand your impact in the world, and build your best life. Today's episode is called Podcast and Connection. Podcasts are a fun way to deepen your relationship with an audience, and you give listeners a better view of you, your thinking, and ideas about your specialty and how you can help them. Before we dive in, though, I want to share a quote with you from Jim Rohn. He says that success is doing ordinary things in an extraordinary way. And I want you to think about that, because the things that you do to create episodes and create content out there, they're not just tasks to be done. You have to think about them in the larger picture of what they mean to the people that are consuming them. As opposed to just being something you put out there with your message, you have to flip it and be extraordinary and think of them before you do it so that your perspective speaks to them. And that's what I mean by doing ordinary things in an extraordinary way. So, connection, right? We're talking about connections. Why are we talking about this? Well, podcast audiences are listening very intently. A recent study done at the end of 2022 by the Listening Research Institute said that 80% of listeners listen to all or most of every 80% of listeners listens to the entire episode that they start. Now, how many things do you know of online or that is consumable content that people view all of it till the end? I'm not sure you can even keep attention with video that well. With split-second scrolling, we expect on social media that the fact that podcast listeners stay for the entire episode, we have an opportunity to deepen their understanding of us and our thinking, because they're naturally looking to be there for the entire episode. They're not rushing to the end. They are intently listening. And that 80% is nothing to sneeze at, let me tell you, compared to what we get with interrupt marketing and social media. And the other thing to think about is a podcast appearance gives an opportunity to expand reach to audiences besides our own. Podcast listeners are more likely to follow brands on social media, and they then, on average, tune into 8 different shows per week. So if you are appearing on a podcast and they're listening to that show, then they might pick up you and move and try out another episode. Or they might see you on other places that you're a guest at and get more exposure to you. So it's very common for podcast listeners to branch out and look for other things to listen to. They are not dedicated just to one source. At least that's what the research is showing. And the other thing to think about is that almost half, 46% of the U.S. population listens to spoken word audio daily. That's radio and podcasts. And over 1/3 of Americans, 104 million, listen to podcasts regularly. So you want to think about podcasting as a very important place to reach an audience similar to social media's size, but the listeners are more intent. You're not interrupting them. They're choosing to be listeners. And that makes a big difference as how much attention you get from them. So 73% of the U.S. population 12 and over have listened to online audio in the last month. That is a staggering number. 3/4 of the population in the U.S., right? 43% of the U.S. men and 39% of U.S. women listen to podcasts, which is also staggering numbers. Very few places that many people go to on a regular basis. So the stats reveal trends relating to their daily habits and routines. So podcast fans listen to radio 65 minutes more than Americans. 80% of listeners listen to most every podcast they start, as I said, and they subscribe to an average of 8 shows, or 6 shows, and they listen to 8 a week. So that is like amazing to get that, right? Consume an average of 11 hours of podcasts a week. So I think that you're best served by treating podcasts like it's its own platform or own genre, and participate in it. If you cannot build your own podcast, which that's a heavy lift, but if you want to participate, be a guest on as many platform podcasts as you can, and make sure that you're speaking to what they need. So, how to connect to your ideal client with your podcast or guest appearance? That's the question, right? Well, how do they find the podcast? How do they know? 30% of new podcast listeners search the internet to find new shows, so they use Google. 19% ask friends or family, 17% use social media. So I would say that one of the ways that help people find you guest appearing or on your own podcast is to make sure that you have it on your website set up so that Google can read it and put it in their catalog so that people know what it's all about. And the more you have about your podcast, the episodes that you have a page per episode, and the more you talk about it on your website, the more Google will know about it and feed the search engines when people are looking for a solution. The other thing is you want to speak to their issues, connecting to their needs. So you're presenting what they need when they put the words into search. If you have a podcast, your episodes can be titled and described as a conversation about your potential client's need or issue. You can, in previous episodes, we talked about keywords and how to find them. Your audience may use these keywords or questions, right, to put into search. And we want to include those wherever we can with synonyms or exact phrases or different phrasing, and provide deep depth of content so that they are chosen as a result when someone searches for them. Your titles and your show notes should also include questions that they offer the prospective clients often ask about your topic. So I know if you're a guest, you can't really dictate what is said or what the questions are on an interview, but if you do get asked about your business, you can craft your response as an answer to an often asked question. And then in the show notes, you could say Denise answers the question, blah, blah, blah. And that way, that question then gets cataloged as part of that podcast episode. And that's really helpful for you. So after you do all this, your audience wins, okay? You start them on their journey to a solution. They get a skill. They start solving a problem or addressing a need. And then you win by feeling the satisfaction of knowing you served them and helped them. And you started them knowing who you are and beginning to know, like, and trust you, hopefully, and possibly doing business with you in the future. But you started them along on the journey. And they help them understand what you are like to work with, ultimately, by giving them an idea of your in-depth knowledge and what you do. So the other thing to understand is when you are talking about podcasts with respect to search engines, you want to give clues within your podcast episode on your platform or on your website, certain cues that the programs Google has that reads all the internet pages knows that it's a podcast episode and what it's about. So you want to put the question or issue you're speaking about in your title of your episode, if it's your podcast. If it's not your podcast, then when you put it on your website, on your webpage, you can include that question or issue within your description or your title. And then you can include keywords in the show notes if it's your podcast on a platform, or on your website in the page description, or in the other text that you put on the page. You want to use tags on the platform that people use to search for podcasts so that when people are searching, they get categories of where you would catalog your podcast. Is it under business? Is it under creative arts? Is it under graphic design? Is it under entrepreneurship? You get what I mean? And then if you can get a transcript that's well done, and I don't mean get a really terrible one from Otter, then don't read it. You have to get a good one, or at least a high level one, and include that on your webpage or in your show notes. Because it's audio, it'll help the programs understand what's really included in the context of the podcast if you put that text within your page. So those are the 4 things you can do for a podcast episode to give clues to search engines about what it's about so they'll catalog it properly. And that's going to help you be served up as a response when people ask questions, right? Because that's ultimately what you're doing. You're making a connection with them. You're opening the door by saying, I understand you. I understand what your issues are. And if you're interviewing with someone else, you're speaking to their audience and you don't know them very well. So you're just presenting yourself as an authority, as an expert in your field. You're being genuine, and all those personality traits are showing through. You may not be able to speak exactly to your business topic, but you will get the tone of it when you get to describe what you do, how your origin story got you to where you are. All those things are social proof, and they provide so many cues to people about how trustworthy you are, how you think, what your ideas are, how you dress, how serious you take things, whether you're easygoing and warm or whether you're more serious. And, so people can get a lot from listening to your voice or seeing a video of you doing a podcast too. That's often done. So give the clues to the search engines by repurposing or making sure your podcast or the episode you appear on are on your sites. But also think about what you're saying in the context of who's listening, and make sure that you're giving as many clues as possible to what you might be like to work with. And this can help you make deeper, longer lasting connections and build relationships in the future. So thank you. So before we go, I want to talk about my new workshop called Simple Ways to Make Yourself Findable. And I want to ask you, are you findable online? Because if they can't find you, they can't do business with you. So it's really worth analyzing and taking the steps necessary to make sure that your content, all the blogs, podcasts, videos that you create are findable in Google search, because that's where people are going to find new things that they want to experience. And I hope that you will visit my website at denisemillet.com/simpleways and find out more about the workshop and how it can help you. Because ultimately, we're working with Google. Google has many, many features built in, but we don't control it. All we do is provide information and hope that they read it and understand it to put it in their catalog. So you want to take the right steps to make sure it understands what your pages and your episodes are all about, so that you are served up as an answer when someone has a question that you can answer. So thank you so much for joining me. I'm so glad you could join me for this episode of Marketing Matters. I know how precious your time is. My hope is that you came away from this episode with 1 or 2 nuggets you could apply to your business. And I want to provide clear, useful information for you so you can have a thriving business, amazing relationships with your customers and clients. And as always, if you have any questions, post a comment on my show Facebook page, Marketing Matters. The link is in the profile for the show. And tune in next week when we will have more ideas and topics we'll share on marketing and technology for you. Have a great week.